everybody. Welcome back. I'm Susan Linder, your host of the Innovation Storyteller Show, where we help folks who have a mandate to innovate tell better stories to get the resources, the runway, and the recognition you so rightly deserve. I'm really excited to have my guest on with me today, who is not only a famed member of the original, well, with the PayPal mafia, I guess, if we could call it that, originally with PayPal, but certainly has gotten his beyond his feet wet. He is really diving headlong into all things AI and giving us insights on how to use AI, not just in our day-to-day work, but maybe also from a creative standpoint, an innovation standpoint, and thinking about what this next layer of life looks like with AI as our constant companion in it. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Mike Tedesco, who spends his days thinking about how AI will change how we create using generative tools like ChatGPT, Midjourney, and the ever-growing slate of AI tools. He used to work at PayPal, focused on innovation, where he evangelized creativity to employees of every nation. And at PayPal, he also had many roles in the field of from product management to marketing to launch, which I imagine was a bit chaotic to say the least, but also super exciting. Previously, he founded a company called Sketch Maven, where long startup nights turned his appearance to unshaven but happy, I hope. Prior to his career in tech, he was in finance and accounting, starting his career at the company with a meatball logo, none other than GE. I hadn't actually heard it called the
That's what
meatball
we used to call it,
before.
was the meatball. Yes, yes.
Fantastic. Long-standing client of mine too. So happy to talk about all things GE. Mike has an MBA from Berkeley and a BS from Illinois, and occasionally teaches leadership to mature girls and boys. Mike has also been granted over 100 US utility patents. And if you don't like his rhymes, you're on his list of enemy combatants, FYI. So Mike tries to be a very helpful guy, and I'm going to ask him for all the help in the world to help all of us tell better stories around the innovations that we are all working on right now. So, Mike, thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you, Susan. Thank you for having me. And I have never heard my rap version of my bio, so better paraphrase than you did. You have some skills there.
So let's dive into it. Nobody walks in through the front door of innovation, right? We all kind of get there through these circuitous routes. So, how did you find your way to innovation?
Yeah, what I used to tell everybody is, well, I went the typical way into innovation, which was, of course, starting my career as an accountant. And
Yeah,
I say, like,
breakthroughs.
as everyone does. But no, that's how I started my career. And yeah, I was at General Electric doing finance and accounting there, and I was horrible at it. I found an opportunity to move into strategy at a paper company. So this was like literally in the days where the British office was happening and then the US office was taking off. So like the amount of Dunder Mifflin and Wordham Hog jokes that I got over that time was surreal, but that was kind of my life. But I was doing
Wow.
strategy and M&A there. And I don't know. I was always the weird guy. I mean, for lack of a better term. So like I was very focused on environmental strategy. I was actually seeing, can we change our strategy from turning trees into paper to just turning trees into stuff? So was leading a project where we were looking at like synthetic fuels and actually using trees to make biofuels and things like that. And this was in 2007 when oil prices were skyrocketing, like the economics worked. Financial crash happened, the economics didn't work anymore, and that all got killed. But did some startups, and I've just kind of always jumped around and been curious about things. And so fast forwarding a bunch of years, joining PayPal, started in product there, jumping from job to job, loving the experience, but always doing different things. When there was an opportunity when PayPal split from eBay in 2015 to kind of define what innovation was going to be for us, this kind of quote unquote newly formed company, it was a great chance. And I was fortunate enough to be considered for that. And And it started, we were a company with 15 years of history already, although we were a new company. And it was fun to be able to kind of help define, well, what is that innovation culture we want to create?
Do you think innovators are these kind of outliers? If I'm thinking about my lovely listeners and their corporate positions now as innovators, do you think most innovators feel like outliers inside of big organizations?
I think you very much can. Yeah. I
Mm,
mean, innovators are curious people. They're people who ask a lot of questions. I
yeah,
know I ask a lot of questions, and sometimes in big organizations, that's not encouraged. It might be much more of a, hey, just do your work mentality than to actually observe, well, should we be doing this? And asking all of those difficult questions. And so a lot of times that'll be squashed. And I think for an innovator, you got to find the right leaders that'll support it in an organization that can help you and your abilities thrive, or find the right company that has a larger structure to do that, or kind of resort to being a cog and work on your innovation stuff in your spare time. I mean, those to me, like if you must innovate, those are kind of like the three different paths for you to potentially follow.
so I almost feel like by nature, of course, you're going to be the outlier. Of course you are. Because if everyone was innovating, then who would be doing the block and tackle work
Yeah.
of the organization? Who would be hitting the quarterly goals? Who would actually be making sure the thing that we invented 2 years ago is still getting to market today? Of course you are.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, a very personal story on that. So my wife and I met, we've been married for 20 years now. We met when
Congratulations.
we were at GE. We were both in finance there together. Fast forward all this time, she's still in finance and is amazing at it. I lasted about 2 years of finance because I couldn't do it. I didn't have the talent, the skills, the focus, the whatever it took for her to succeed. And look, we're very different personality types. And I'm not saying by any stretch that she's not innovative, but she's just it's a different personality type completely, where I could never do her job and she has told me she can like never do mine. And so like you naturally gravitate to different things.
Right. Fair enough. And so as you think about that step from accounting, right, and
Mhm.
then eventually getting to where you were in PayPal, I'm so curious about the innovations that you have evolved over this time. 100 patents is no small shakes. That is massive. I was talking to a client at ExxonMobil yesterday when asked who has the most patents in this company. It was one guy with 115 patents, just US patents. So I'm not sure about the international iterations of that, but that's a tremendous number of patents. How did that come to be?
Well, first, I'd love to meet that guy. I'm sure I would have a lot of fun. Like I'm naturally drawn to this. Look, it all came from I was a product launch manager on a product that PayPal was building out called PayPal Beacon. This would have been 2012, 2013. Let me give a little bit of background and then I'll answer your question directly.
Mm,
PayPal Beacon was an in-store payment method where it was actually a piece of hardware that we were building where a retailer could stick that in the wall. It's
okay.
going to have a connectivity to any cell phone walking in there through Bluetooth Low Energy, which was a new technology at the time that would allow a cell phone coming in to passively talk to that device. That would enable things like hands-free check-ins. And so you could literally walk into a store, never take your phone out of your pocket or purse. Your face would show up on the screen there. You could check out and walk out of the store and you get a receipt in your email later on, blah, blah, blah. It was very cool tech. And that was just one example. A lot of different things you could potentially do with this. So we were working on this and it was, kind of one of the exciting things in the company. And as a launch manager, I got to meet with a lot of different teams, both internal and external to the company. It was sort of a role that was half product manager, half PMO, sort of an integration of that. The sole purpose was we get the product out there and we make sure customers love it. That's what we were very much focused on. And so one day I had a meeting with a bunch of lawyers. Oh, no, actually, I'm sorry, it was just one lawyer. But like I always had meetings with lawyers about whatever. Like that was always like, hey, give Mike the lawyer meeting. And in that meeting, the guy sat me down. I remember it so well. It was just the two of us in a big old conference room. And he said to me, hey, you're working on this beacon thing. Tell me a little bit about it. I'm like, okay, it does this and this and this. He worked for, oh, we could do this, this, and this. And he says to me, like, well, can it do this? And then I say, well, yeah, it could actually do that. And yes, and it could do this. And yes, and it could do this. And yes, and it could do this. This was my first experience ever with a patent attorney. Is that like, and this is what I found out. And like, I literally didn't even know that going into the meeting. I'm just like, I'm meeting with a lawyer. I know nothing about this. What the patent attorney was doing was just trying to think of like, hey, this core concept, if we're going to file patents on this, what else can we do? It is
Right. How can
one
we
big,
stretch the rubber band and keep it going, right? All the different ways the Play-Doh can be shaped.
you got it.
Yeah.
And just to get in the world of patents in the US, like when you file these things, you effectively are being granted by the US government a 20-year monopoly on an idea.
Mm.
And as long as you can explain how to make that idea, and it's not obvious and a few other criteria, you can then file a patent on that. And especially at this time, it was before Alice and some other legal things that I won't get into. We were just looking for a bunch of like, well, what is possible? What could you do with this? And to me, this was like the most fun I could possibly be having at work.
Wow.
So I found out about this and I meet more. And so we filed a whole bunch of different patents on the beacon type technology. It didn't work out, which is a whole nother story that we can get into of like why that didn't work out. But still, the technology was there and it was really exciting. But then it just took me down a path of like, huh, could I do these meetings with my team to just talk about maybe other products that they're working on? And so I would like literally went on my own, not part of my job. I would just have these brainstorming sessions on my own and say, hey, lawyers, here's a bunch of things we're thinking about. Like, is there anything to this? And they would come back and like did this for years. And you do that for enough time. And eventually you accumulate all these ideas and patents and write these things. And I don't know. You have a whole bunch of things. Some of them become reality, some don't, but it is a super fun. It's like the most fun somebody with my type of mind, my weird archetype could possibly having of just saying what is possible in the future.
Yeah. So you get to this place where you're like, wow, look at the elasticity, the flexibility I have. And it's actually coming under the guise of what ordinarily you might think of as legal constraint, right? So
Yeah.
often they're like, oh, let the former professional services guy go talk to the lawyers, right?
Yes.
They'll be able to speak the same language, but what you found was a freedom and a flexibility that allowed you to capitalize on those ideas. Now, all of those ideas aren't always great ideas, right? It wasn't necessarily that people
No.
loved all the ideas that you were coming up with. So tell us a little bit more about Beacon and maybe some of the other enterprise tools that you were thinking about that maybe didn't go exactly as planned.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, look. I mean, I had just flat out horrible ideas. I mean, so to be even before I get to Beacon, like, so if I have 100 patents, I probably had two, three, 4,000 ideas about different things. I mean, so to get a good idea, you need to have a lot of ideas, and
Yeah.
it's a filtering process. You just have to come up with a whole bunch of dumb things, crazy things, all this kind of stuff to be able to have a good bunch, some good ideas in the end.
I call
Um,
that the Teflon spaghetti, like the
yeah,
stuff that never sticks to the wall.
yeah. I mean, and also I tell people it's about hitting home runs. It's not about batting average, to use a baseball analogy. Like it does not, nobody out there cares how many bad ideas Thomas Edison had. I used to actually show in presentations. I'm sure you could find, people can find this online, but if they Google Thomas Edison baby doll, there is a video of a baby doll that Thomas Edison created. It is the most horrific looking thing, and it had an audio track in it, and it is literally the thing of nightmares. So you can find it online. Nobody knows about this thing. Nobody cares about this because they care about incandescent light bulb and they care about all the things that Edison made that were great. Nobody cares about your failures when you're an inventor. And look, that's true in most of the business. Like people don't obsess about Steve Jobs. Well, he invested in the Segway, which was true. He was like one of the lead proponents and lead investors of the Segway. Segway was a miserable failure in so many ways. But like people don't talk about that with Steve Jobs. Like no, they look at the successes. And I think to be great at ideating, you just have to have tons of bad ideas and you have to be comfortable with it. And ultimately, no, people don't care about that stuff. but let me, and again, they sometimes make for great stories. So PayPal Beacon is one of them. So with this new technology that was coming out, this new Bluetooth standard, one of our engineers who was a former entrepreneur hired into PayPal, just a brilliant engineering mind, a brilliant thinker, was just tinkering for weeks on this. And then I think he was basically just kind of making prototypes and saying, with this new standard, we could literally make a piece of hardware and have that talk to a phone, what I had effectively described before. And this was really intriguing to us. Like, because in 2012, like that was very foreign. I mean, mobile phones were still early on at that time. Like I was on the mobile team before that because back then mobile was its own separate group in a company,
Of course it
a group
was.
of misfits almost within a company. And now it's just a standard.
You want to do what
Um,
on your phone was right, was the question. You want to
that's
do
right.
that connectivity? Yeah.
Exactly. So he had this concept and would just hack on it in addition to his day job. And eventually it got the attention, and PayPal had a very open culture to things like that. The president, David Marcus, at the time kind of got wind of this. They knew each other and was like, wow, this is cool. Like, you should make this into an actual thing. Let's like start to move forward with it. We don't really know how to build hardware as a company. So we had a small hardware team. They're trying to figure it out, having to deal with whole issues like you got to get this thing certified as hardware. And you can't just produce these things and throw it out into the world because they generate heat. They do all of these things. All of these things we're trying to figure out. So we're working through all these technological problems. And finally, we get to a point where we can actually test it out. So 2013, PayPal's in San Jose. Up the road from us is Stanford University, just a 20-mile drive, University Avenue in there. So a whole bunch of really tech-savvy students are walking around this campus. There's a bunch of stores there. We had relationships with some. Like, this is
Mm.
a perfect place for us to test it out. So we go and start installing these things in stores. And every Friday, I would just go. Sometimes I'd bring a bunch of PayPal employees so we can monitor as well. And I would just start talking to customers. And talking to all of these 19, 20-year-olds, the general response we got was, why the hell would I ever use my phone to make a payment in a store? That was like, and, so, and again, this is Stanford, but this was 2013. And they're like, what? Why would I do this? I just take out my credit card. It's easy. Like, people have been habituated in the United States for the last 50 years to just be able to easily pay with cash or credit card. It's easy, it's frictionless, and all that. The only reason that NFC payments in the US at least took off today was because of COVID, because people didn't want to touch things. I mean, that was the only reason it really started to take off.
Is that right?
Um, yeah. I mean, even now, NFC payments in the US are still pretty small, but you had two things happening. One, they had to swap out all the hardware. So we're no longer swiping cards, we're inserting them,
Uh,
which meant they had to get new hardware. So those had NFC readers in it, so at least enabled it. But during COVID, you saw a huge jump because people literally didn't want to put their card into a dirty, quote unquote, terminal or anything like that. And so you saw, and so that's what really finally got things like Apple Pay and Google Pay to take off.
you
But
know,
for us at Beacon, look, this was 2013. This wasn't 2020, 2021. You, as cool as technology is, as amazing as all the patents we filed, all the other great things we did. I mean, I literally, our engineer was driving over to Cupertino to meet with Apple engineers to explain to them how Bluetooth could work better so they can make iPhones better as part of that. Like, I mean, like he was like kind of resident expert in this. And like, so we're very ahead of that technology, but people didn't want it. People weren't ready for it. And
but
that's what, in the world of innovation, timing is everything in so many ways.
how much of that is, because this is a conversation we have on the show all the time. How much of it is timing? How much of it was getting the story right?
Oh, look, I think for this, it was more, story's huge. We'll get into more of the story side. I think for this specific thing, it was timing because even getting the story right, there just wasn't the need for consumers. Habits are hard things to break. And if you don't have, so I don't think there was a compelling story that would have made, in Silicon Valley, we often say is something 10x better than what it used to be. Is swiping, was using this thing 10x better than taking out your credit card and swiping it? No. Maybe it's 2x better or 1x. It's not 10x better. And until you get to that level, there's almost no way to do it. We needed a better product to be able to influence people, and we didn't have that. We just
Yeah.
had, yeah, you don't have to take your credit card out anymore.
When I had this experience, I was on a speaking tour in Europe, and I went to the tulip market in Amsterdam thinking I
Oh,
was going
cool.
to smuggle some bulbs back for my mom. And it was a rainy day. So I had my briefcase and I had an umbrella and my purse, and I left my wallet in the tulip market. And I went back and it was gone.
Oh,
So
no.
I had my passport, but all my cash and credit cards were gone. Now I had loaded all of my credit cards into my Apple Wallet, into my iPhone.
Hmm.
And I thought, I cannot, let's just say this wasn't my first time doing this, not abroad, but at home. But I was like, I can't call my spouse right now and tell him that I lost my wallet. Well, and I still had a week to go. And so I said to myself, I'm going to figure out how to get around Europe without a wallet, without cash, without credit cards, and see how it works. And this was 2017. So it was still very early days when it came to Apple Pay. And so I figured out how to use apps and Apple Pay to get around really the world. And it was such a wake up call to be like, how could we really live without cash? How could we really live without cards? So it was getting room service in hotels, getting the local Grubhub delivered for food, and then being able to use my credit card that way, using Uber and different apps to try to get those things satisfied. And then getting to the airport, and people in the airport took Apple Pay. Surprisingly,
Wow.
it seemed like travel retail was actually one of the first things because it was so universal, and the myriad of different cards could all be satisfied with a phone. And so that's how I wound up getting through. But it was big confession time. I was like, can I order the cards from Germany and have them arrive at home, but just as I'm walking through the door, so there's not a stack of replacement credit cards waiting? And I really have to confess, Ben, that I lost all my stuff.
That's
Uh,
I love that story, Susan. And my favorite part about that is if you would have done this 500 years earlier, when the tulip bubble, like you would have had to, been enough money to just sell off those tulip bulbs so that you had to be able to make a fortune off of that potentially. But
and I bought the right tulips before
if you bought the right tulip bulbs at the
have
right
to be
time,
the right
that would have
one.
paid for your whole vacation.
That's
Um,
exactly.
no, but I think with payments, it's so true that you have like actually in cities where there's a lot of travel, like it is very regional. Places like Australia use NFC a lot. Kenya, mobile payments are very much at the
They're
forefront there with M-Pesa. Like,
all over Africa. Yeah.
yeah, many countries in the US, part of the reason why, frankly, in the US, we were so behind the rest of the world is because we had a decent payment system that, again, people were trained on for 50 years. So, in many ways, because we were a little bit ahead of the curve, it was harder for us to transition over to what we see today, where, yeah, NFC payments and Apple Pay is pretty much ubiquitous in the United States today, where 7 years ago it wasn't.
That's right. Yeah. So so this is an interesting question, right? So moving on from Beacon, though, the stories that needed to be told to get people on board is like, we don't have a 10x story, therefore no dice, right?
Mm.
We don't have a 10x technology and we don't have a 10x story that makes
So,
it compelling enough.
yeah, I mean, so I think in the world of innovation, not everything has to be 10x to be very clear. But
You mean
to
6 minute
change,
abs versus 5 minute abs, right?
that's right, yeah. Yeah. So to get people to change habits, to get your customers to do something new or whatever it might be, that's when you need that kind of thing. So one of the things I did at PayPal, talking about storytelling, when all new employees would come in, we would have orientation day. And one of the things I would get to do would be to talk to all the employees about, hey, this is what innovation means at PayPal. I was indoctrinating them and PayPal culture and vision and all this other kind of stuff. And it was great. It was one of the most fun things I got to do. We got to do X.
Indoctrinating or orienting? Like it sounds
Uh,
like pretty
orienting, yes, orienting is probably a better word choice, but yeah. But it was very true though. And one of the things that I was very prescriptive on from the beginning, I never defined the word innovation. And I was actually very clear on that because, and I would actually tell people I'm not going to define it because for different people in different roles, this is kind of what we were referring to before, like it's going to mean different things. If you're an account rep, if you're an attorney, if you're in finance, whatever it is, it might mean something very different for you than a designer or someone else. And it might even within that same function for different designers, it might be interpreted differently. And one of the things we found out and we absolutely believed, and this was the tagline we used within the company, was everyone can innovate. And it was a little bit stolen from Ratatouille, to be clear. One of the themes of Ratatouille was like anyone can cook,
what?
I think was what it was. But that's what we used. And we used it across all our internal communications. And we tried to really show that. And it is something at our core that I do believe because we are an innovative species. That is frankly how we got to where we are as a society today. You just need the surroundings to help you innovate, the constraint. I will tell if your children are going hungry tomorrow, you are going to find a way to get them fed, to get them food, whatever it is. People get really creative when the stakes are high and the constraints are real.
Fair enough.
And I'm not saying like at PayPal, to be very clear, we didn't starve any children to get better products out the door or anything like that.
Good to
But
hear. Good to know.
but but I mean, but like what are the right constraints you need in that environment? And so when we were talking about innovation within the company, that was a big part of the story that we were having. That it was something different for every person, but innovation was your role. So PayPal, we had, I don't know, between 20 and 30,000 people. I don't even know necessarily when I was there. Our innovation team was between 1 and 4 people. And it was very strategic to do that because one of the things we wanted to signal to the rest of the company is like I feel in a lot of other companies, especially in the payments industry, I knew kind of people who ran the innovation teams elsewhere. You would sometimes have like smaller companies with 50 or 100 or 200 people on an innovation team. And it really made like a two-class structure. It kind of made, hey, here's the people working on day to day. Here's the people working on the fun stuff, the sexy
Hmm.
stuff, the whatever. And like that is not what we wanted to do. At PayPal, we had a long culture of just people out of necessity making great innovations. If you mentioned I was part of the I really wasn't part of the PayPal mafia. Those guys are kind of an earlier generation from me, but
Gotcha.
knowing the stories and knowing the people that were a part of that, things like very simple things. Like one of my favorite examples was if in the United States, if you've ever had to confirm a bank, sometimes like you would put in, this has kind of changed with Plaid, but maybe 5, 10 years ago, even this was still happening, where it would send micro deposits. It would send like 13 cents and 47 cents. And then you have to tell the app, hey, these were the deposits, and that's how they know you are the actual bank. That was an engineer at PayPal came up with that innovation because they were asking the question like back in 99, 2000, how are we like going to figure out that the bank the person is giving us is the right bank? And somebody was like, well, it should have a PIN number. Well, how do you get a PIN number at a bank? The bank doesn't tell us the
Right.
customer's PIN. Well, we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
create it. We could just send a little bit of money. And if we send 13 cents and 47 cents, and then they tell us that, we can be reasonably assured that that is the right bank,
Okay.
that is your bank because you were able to see those micro deposits made. And this is a technology a bunch of other companies use as well. It's probably been used hundreds of millions of times to confirm banks back in the day. But like that was something that came from the bottom up. And that was really the type of culture, even this was at a time when PayPal was a couple hundred employees, at being tens of thousands of employees, we wanted to continue to permeate.
But it's really fascinating to think about that on a couple of different levels. One is I think everybody listening wants to figure out a way to make innovation part of the culture of their organization so that we know that the most innovative cultures are ones first and foremost that have a very high risk tolerance, meaning it's okay to fail here. And to your point about the Teflon spaghetti, about just many, many things, because we remember the things that work, not the things that didn't, and that's okay. I
Absolutely.
will say though, I did go to the Museum of Failure, and it
Yeah.
is a monument to things that have died. I'll also say they had a special exhibit while I was there in LA on all of Trump's particular failures as a special side exhibit, because you might become really great at that. You might
Yeah.
become really great at stupendous failures, but
Well,
you might also find that it just takes one to actually make you president of the United States, right? That
yeah. Well,
might just be
and one
that
of the
one.
things, sorry, just to build on that failure point. So I got a lot of inspiration. I'm sure many of the folks are familiar with Ben and Jerry's Flavor Graveyard. So in
Oh,
Vermont, they have,
I'm not. More about that.
oh, wow. So at Ben and Jerry's headquarters, they actually have a graveyard where they put tombstones with the years that it existed for all the ice creams they're no longer producing. And this
Wait,
is
does it
some,
sit in like a bed of those chocolate crunchies that looks like dirt? That would be great. That would be
I
awesome.
I think it's more of like a haunted mansion style, like if Disneyland, like it's more of like one of those graveyards type there, like in a flower bed. So it is like literally
Awesome.
out there, and you can see pictures of it online.
Uh-huh.
And so one of the things, and this was right before pandemic, before while we were still in the office, a couple people in our innovation lab, just in the innovation lab we had was almost all volunteers. It was almost all people from across the company who just want to do more, who want to work on fun stuff. And they knew I would never say no to something. As long as there was like it didn't matter. Like there was always something interesting and exciting. So we actually had people building a PayPal product graveyard. And we never actually got to, it may be launched now, I don't know, but like still that the big wooden slab is potentially there where we were putting like QR codes and we were having interviews of people talking about the products that failed and why they failed. Because even just in my 11 years at the company, I found that back in 2012, we were trying to do QR codes in stores.
Mm,
And we were at Home Depot and Toys R Us and all this kind of stuff. And like nobody wanted to pay with their phone, let alone with a QR code or anything like that. But those things, just because they didn't work in 2012, doesn't mean that they wouldn't work. If you go to Asia and places like that, there are QR codes everywhere for payments. And it was important to like learn the lessons. I mean, two things: learn the lessons of the past, tell the stories about the past so people can learn from it and understand, but also then could apply, well, certain things might apply today, certain things might not apply today, and to really understand that. So that was a big thing that we were focused on. But I will very truthfully say, as a company, we were decent at accepting failure. We were never good at it. And that was something that was always a little bit of a frustration for me personally within there. It was like, even we have a great innovative culture, we were never fully at the point of embracing it. And that was one thing I was always very focused on, and probably one of the things where I might have failed myself in truly being able to find a way to get that embrace within the culture.
yeah, I think consequence is the big indicator of whether we embrace risk or not and embrace failure or not, is what's the consequence to me professionally if I fail?
That's
And
right.
how adept as leaders are we at being able to convey what the failure taught us and apply the learnings to the next thing seems to be the greatest safety net from folks who have been on the show. Is, are we able now to take the learnings from the failures and apply it quickly to the next new thing?
Yeah.
Because if not, we get a little left behind.
Yeah, I think Annie Duke, I might be getting the author wrong, but I think she has talked about this a lot of separating. It's
Poker
very much
player.
a poker player. It's a very poker
Yeah.
player mindset. That's why I'm thinking it was Annie Duke.
Yeah.
Separating the results from the actions taken. I mean,
Yeah.
so often in companies, if your project does good, you're rewarded for that. If your project does bad, you are not. And within that is the assumption of, well, you did good things to make the good happen, and you did bad things to make the bad happen. When the world really doesn't work that way. There is a fair amount of luck, fair amount of chance, fair amount of all these things. You could do wrong things and have a good result, and you could do right things and have a bad result. And I think it's really hard for companies to decouple that reward structure. I'm not aware of any that truly do that, but I know that's something that at least her in her poker player mindset has talked about. And I would love to see like who is the company that could really embrace that.
I remember one of my guests from Tesla was on, and he was the guy, he was the materials innovation guy. He was responsible for the glass in the Cybertruck when Eli previewed it to the rest of the world, and he hit it with those metal snowballs right on the glass.
I remember this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'll have to pull up the episode number, but if you could just do a search on the website for Tesla in the podcast, he said he came to work the next day and it was crickets walking down the hallway to his office. And he got into his desk and somebody walked by and yelled, "Hey, glass hole." And he said, "But you know what? I still have a job here. I'm still operating here." And it's because people have a threshold for failure, even on a stage where millions of people were watching.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, turns out you should not hit the door with a sledgehammer and dislodge the glass from its housing prior to hitting it with the steel snowball, which is what they did. If you recall, he hit it with the door with the sledgehammer and went for the glass. And that's what made it unstable. And I only know this because I was at my client Corning Glass that the next day, where the glass team at Corning was freaking out, who built that glass and was like, what went wrong? And
Oh
so
my God.
you have the manufacturer and you have the innovation team talking to each other. And guess what? Everybody kept their jobs because those are two organizations that get it. One that's very young and one that's 170 years old. And they both have cultures of strong thresholds of science and forgiveness in the failure.
That's amazing. I love that. And I wonder, maybe not in that specific, that example, they were able to figure out why it went wrong. And I think maybe one of the reasons why businesses have such a hard time decoupling like results with compensation or promotion or whatever it is you want to call it, it's because they don't know themselves like how you got from there to there. Well, we don't know what went wrong or what went right in this project or whatever it might be. And so if you got good results, well, that must mean you did good. If you get bad results, well, that means you did bad. And I think a lot of it is just like our own ignorance to that, and like testament to the engineers who are like, oh, okay, well, it's not faulty. We didn't test the sequence. That was the mistake we made. But you know what? If you actually do this, this, and this, it actually works to spec. There you go. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So fascinating discovery. So you're now also professing, is that right? Are you actively teaching young minds and indoctrinating them into the folds of
Yeah, I
innovation?
continue my indoctrination. Yes, I do. Yeah, no, I left PayPal in 2022. Amazing time. One of the best experience of my life. Best job I could imagine. I was getting very excited about at that time about artificial intelligence and what might be happening. Again, my background is an accountant, like in finance. I am not an engineer, not a coder. And I remember having machine learning engineers at PayPal doing things in AI that were amazing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could do that stuff. And fast forward to like 2021 with GPT-3 and the things that OpenAI was creating, I'm like, I can actually just talk to this in natural language. This is surreal for me. So 2022 comes around, summer of, I start writing about this because I'm like, hey, everybody, this is like, I think I literally, my first article was like, this is the one technology everyone should be freaking out about. And that was AI. And in August 2022, no one was freaking out about AI. And I'm like, people, like, this is amazing. This could be amazingly good, amazingly bad. Like this, we're on the precipice of something here. So I started writing about that. I got a position at a university where I'm a visiting fellow, which means, yeah, I get to teach, I get to mentor, I get to write, I get to do podcasts or whatever. It's pretty flexible with that. But, I get to talk about all these things and frankly explain these complex concepts to regular folk like myself, I like to think, and see how they could apply it to their day-to-day, to their work life, to their personal life, because there's so much benefit that could come from just knowing what tools are out there and even how to use them.
So for our innovators on the line here, what do you think are the AI tools most helpful to folks who are in the ideation phase around innovation? How can we use AI as a companion, a brainstorming partner? How do you think about how we could be using these tools in our innovation work?
Look, I think it could just start and end pretty much with ChatGPT by OpenAI. Like if you pay the $20 a month, if you would have told me you would have access to something like this for $20 a month 3 years ago, I would have said, no, that's insane. There's no way I would be able to have something that powerful for $20. I think we quickly take things like that for granted. So whether it's a corporate plan or whatever, won't get into data issues for a second, but just assume that you could put whatever you want into that model. I would create, they allow something called custom GPTs. And so these are things where you could kind of give them a custom set of instructions. You could actually share it with people, like within your organization. You could share it with anyone, anywhere. And I would create like 5 different personas in there. I would create one that's like brainstorming partner. Another one that's like devil's advocates. Another one is story builder, helper outer, or something like that, or whatever it might be. Like different, yeah. Well, and I'll get to that in a second because like I write in quotes a lot with AI, and AI can't do what humans do. So Susan, you absolutely still have a job in helping out organizations with that.
Okay, got it. I'm
100%.
just waiting to get to the end of this interview to find out if I have a job. But yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I get
But
so
you can use,
frustrated with it. I start writing and I was like, you have turned me off from writing on this topic altogether. Thank you for your input. I'm now going to take this in a 180-degree different direction. Thank you, ChatGPT.
yeah. Well, I mean, and so one of the things you get, so giving it a big, and these things take maybe 10 minutes to make. And you have to treat AIs like you would treat a summer intern. It
That's work.
will, yeah, it is some work up front. It is absolutely, but once you kind of get it going, then it's flowing. Then if in the beginning of summer, it's a little bit painful. By the end of summer, oh my gosh, they're actually kind of figuring
For
it out.
leaving?
Yeah, exactly. But the AI doesn't leave. That's the big thing. And the AI will
Ah,
work 24/7 for you if you want and need it to. That's the difference between, but like in many ways, it is like that. You can't assume this is some all-knowing, all-powerful orb. You have to explain it out. You have to then give it prompts and say, hey, we're thinking of a new business line. So you feed it, this is the information about our company. Here are 5 ideas I have. Like, give me 5 more that are similar to that. And it's going to give you 5, 10 things, whatever it might be. Say, oh, okay, 6 and 7 seem really interesting, but like, what if you did the opposite? Or like, just keep asking it questions again and again. And the ability, one of the things that these tools are best at are brainstorming. And if I had access to this back in the day where I was just running these brainstorming sessions, my God, we would have like literally just had an AI running in the background, yes, anding, thinking of the opposite. We'd probably put like 50 different questions of it and would just be iterating off of these ideas again and again. And it never gets tired. Like brainstorming can be exhausting. Like after an hour of running a session, I would just be exhausted. These things never get tired. But with storytelling, so maybe you could get a decent first draft of that. But the thing to Susan, what I said before, like AI, it's not fully polished. It can write a decent like resignation letter. It can write things that are short form, decently well, that don't have to have too much art to it, where there's a certain structure and so forth. I've been writing, I say in quotes, AI books now for almost 2 years, where I will give AI prompts and just have it write a book. And all the books suck, to be very clear, very transparent. I publish all these on Amazon under the pen name Alex Irons. I give all the money to charity for people who do buy it. I'm very transparent that this is an AI writing it. But part of the reason why I do that is because I actually want to track over time how much better is it getting. And maybe it's at a middle school level or something like that now, maybe early high school. But the thing that's interesting, though, is it can generate 15,000 words in 5 minutes. That's the thing that's starting to become really impressive with this. It's going to get better and better. And if you feed that back into the model and say, okay, another AI, edit this now. Another AI, be a literary critic and do that. If you keep on doing that again and again, you actually will get a good book versus kind of just the one shot AI write a book. AI in some scary ways does think like humans. Can I swear on this or no?
yes,
Yeah,
all day long, all day long.
okay, Hemingway has a quote. All first drafts are shit, is Hemingway's quote. And that is true. And this was Hemingway saying that. It is true for every writer, but it is also true for an AI. You will see it. If you keep running it through the model again and again, it will get better. But for like just to get to a first draft of something, that is hugely helpful. It solves
Yeah.
the blank page problem.
Yeah. And it's funny when you go to the National Archives and you see the initial drafts of the Constitution and you
Yeah.
see the drafts of the Declaration of Independence, is guess what? The founding fathers effed it up the first couple of times too. They're not the flawless founding fathers, they're just dads. Like, and I think we can think about our dads and what they didn't get it right the first time. So
Oh, that is such a
be
good
gentle with
example.
yourself. It's the
I, I,
founding
ju-
dad.
I love that example. And actually, I just listened to Year of Living Constitutionally,
Oh, me
or I read it.
too. Jacobs is a friend. Yeah, great, great book. If you haven't
No,
read it yet, yeah, if you haven't read it yet, go for
I
it.
have read every, like, thanks 1,000. I think I couldn't tell you how many times I like gave that book to people and so forth.
For
AJ
sure.
is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no, Year of Living Constitutionally is brilliant. I love his books.
Yeah. So if you haven't read the book yet, by the way, great read before you go to the polls in November. My favorite passage of that book is recognizing that he had the shopping list for George Washington's liquor shopping list that he was passing out at the first election of like 14 casks of rum, 15 casks of rum punch, like all different kinds of celebratory libations that would help make the election process easier for those who could vote, which were basically the landed white gentry right at the time.
Yes.
You know, it was, but it was like everyone had to be absolutely shit faced in order to go to the polls, which I just thought was, we're
I
doing
love
it wrong.
that.
We're absolutely
And
doing it wrong.
and I love the thing that AJ did as well was during the election. I don't know, was it 2022 probably when he was writing this or something? But he had the cake baking. So I
I
guess it
baked
used
a
to be
cake.
you baked a cake. Oh
I
my
baked two
gosh.
cakes and brought them to the poll workers in my town. And they were like, what's happening? Is someone going to poison us? I'm a New Yorker, right? But you're like, wait, you're bringing us cakes? Like, what is what? And then I'm like, can I take a picture of you with the cake? They're like, absolutely not. I'm like, one, just for AJ. It was a great
I
time.
love I love that you did that, Susan. That is so good. That is so good.
Yeah. So bake a cake this November, bring it to your
Yes.
election workers, put a smile on people's faces who are really stressed out, and celebrate our ability to actually cast a vote, which is no small shakes given some of the places we've traveled to. Um,
So well said. Well said.
I'm now going to ask you the question I ask everyone who comes on the show. There are 3 hot seat questions. So
Great.
buckle up. Are you
All
ready?
right. I'm gonna strap myself in. Okay, go
There you
for
go.
it.
Okay. Greatest innovation of all time. What say you?
Ooh. Oh God. Do I like literally fire is what jumped into my head, but I guess that wasn't really invented. That was more found. Greatest
Like North
innovation.
America?
Great potable water, like the sewer, like Roman aqueducts and water systems and sanitation and all that. That's got to be.
I love a good public health message. Fantastic. We're here
Yes,
to
yes.
dispel the myth of the one great genius inventor. So if you could join any innovation team in human history, which team would you have joined?
Oh my gosh, P.T. Barnum. Like I was for about a year. I think I read every single P.T. Barnum book, like you can imagine. This was like 20 years ago, and I was just obsessed with him, his thought process, the things that he would pull off, and so forth. Like the amount of lies in his autobiography compared to all the other ones. Like so yeah. So like I don't think he maybe even had a team. I know you're probably thinking like Bell Labs or something. I would just want to hang out with P.T. Barnum all day.
Right. And the bearded lady.
Yes, yes.
Sure. Why not? And what is something that irritates you or that you wished existed that has not yet been invented or innovated?
Oh, these questions. So, what really irritates me?
Or what do you wish for that isn't here yet that would just make everyone's life so much better?
I mean, so this is on the precipice, but like, sorry for getting semi-serious with this one, but like, immediately jumps out to me, and I think we're a few years away. But the integration of AI with health services, I think, is actually something that has to happen. Doctors in America are ridiculously overworked. It is like, even just if you have health insurance, it's so hard seeing a doctor, just getting in there. The amount of time that you have with them in a given year is ridiculously small. The amount of work that they have to do with typing up notes and like remembering your chart. Like my doctor sees me for 10 minutes a year. They have like 300 other people. They can't remember all this. I think we're going to get to a point, I would say 5 years, where I believe it will actually be considered border, maybe not legally, but borderline medical malpractice if a doctor is not using AI in their practice to supplement what they're doing. It
Mm,
is going to make them so much more powerful in what they do. It is going to help them out immensely. Like if you think about the things we expect doctors to be superhuman, talking about the founding fathers. I think we expect that of doctors too. They are human. They went to med school. And believe me, they're not just keeping up on JAMA and all the New England Journal of Medicine and all these things for like all the paper. Like no human can possibly do all the things that we are expecting our doctors to do. And and I'm not saying AI is going to take their jobs. It's not, because I think the human relationship is important, but it's going to make them so much more effective out there.
yeah.
And that's something that really excites me. And I could already see, again, I'm not a doctor, not medical advice, just to put that disclaimer out there, but I use ChatGPT and Claude all the time for medical stuff. Like if there's
Mm,
something weird on my leg or whatever, I'm like, take a picture. I'm like, what the heck is that thing? Whatever it might be. I'm 47 years old. I got like these questions that are starting to brew now and everything. So like, and again, it's not taking place of a doctor, but at least it's kind of giving me some initial steps, some initial like triaging that I might be able to do for that. And like, I just see these tools getting to be so much better. And we're going to get to the point where like, it's something we need to have in our healthcare system, because like so much of it is broken in the US and many other parts of the world as well.
yeah. And you know what, that scientific discovery too can also, with the weight, hopefully the preponderance of the evidence, that we don't wind up getting old, outdated medical information is being served to us on equal
Yes.
footing, because the old stuff, there's such a preponderance of the old stuff, right? By
Yeah.
volume, that we begin to, I want to say, like de-weight or de-escalate the importance of that in the algorithm. So I'm not told that I have a wandering uterus when I can't figure out where my keys are, and that's what's causing my
Yeah.
my memory loss or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're an astronomer and your whole childhood and all that, you're told that Pluto is a planet, and all of a sudden it's not a planet. There's a transition period, and again, that was very public. That was very much out there in the media sphere and all that. But multiply that by 1,000, and
Right.
there's going to be some things you're not aware of, and you thought were true because you've heard it 100 times. But you know what? There's 10 studies that have completely refuted that now, or whatever it might be, and you don't even know how to weight that. And like, these are things that these tools can do. Again, they're not going to be perfect, but the thing we have to admit is like, nor are doctors. Again,
Neither
they
are
are
we. We're
human.
the ones who built it, right?
Yes, yes, that's right.
Great. So founding dads, when in doubt, just remember their dads telling dad jokes and dad pants, right? Dad, that's who we're starting from.
In dad pants. I love that.
Dad jeans. Mike, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. Where can people connect with you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, Susan, look, it's been a pleasure. I love talking innovation. I love talking AI. I write about AI all the time. I have a LinkedIn newsletter. If you just search for my last name, Todasco, Todasco, it's basically me and my wife on there. I'm the guy, she's the woman. Like, that's the benefit of having a unique last name, and you could follow. It's free. Me talking about AI, or reach out and love to have a chat about anything. So at me and whatever. But I'm on LinkedIn the most because it's the one social network that I get some value of, but after 10 minutes I start to get bored. And that is exactly the balance that I'm looking for in my life.
Yes. So not as spicy as Tabasco, but more memorable as Tedasco. Got it.
Well said. Well said.
Mike, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Susan. It was a pleasure.